Welcome to Dweller of the Dark.
We are wicked wizards demanding the resurrection of the yellowed and blackened bones of forgotten masters of horror, science fiction, fantasy, and beyond. Subscribe, comment, like, or I'll send the vampire Helen to rip your heart out. Writers, poets, songwriters, reach out to us if you want to be part of our growing pile of bones. Writing, ghostwriting services on Upwork and Fiverr. We've had a 98% successful completion rate for projects. Contact links below. Children of Horror, Legion of Ghouls. The season of Halloween has arrived. Each night, we will present a tale, song, or poem in the ghoulish spirit of the season. For day 28, we proudly present one Scotch, one Bourbon, and one beer. Chapter 1 by Jeffrey LeBlanc. Devilishly devoted to horror and Halloween. May your souls always be. I'll never forget that freezing October night, so long ago in Sugar Bear's bar. I recalled, as the sleep pelted the old tin roof, that Stevie Ray Vaughan had been wailing away some soulful blues on Terry Terracino's new jukebox. The song might have been the blues legends' classic One Scotch, One Bourbon, and One Beer, as I knocked back my two-finger jig of Louis XIV 20-year-old liquor. I felt the spicy taste on my tongue and a burn to warm my soul. But as to the particulars that night, over 20 years, I reckon, my mind ain't as sharp as it once was on remembering. And on that particular bitch of an evening, no offense to you bloodthirsty bitches out there, I always try to forget. But I do remember that fool that came half staggering and half crazed into Sugar Bear's. I'd been sitting to the left corner of the place watching the ice and rain pelt the cypress and black waters of the Teche. The time was rounding 11 o'clock in the evening, and Terry, with nigh a customer but me in his fine establishment, and what had to be the worst Louisiana ice storm on record, was getting ready to call it a night. Then, as Terry went grab the keys and I snuck another spiced swig from behind the bar, I heard the door burst open, almost giving me a start. The force of the door's abrupt slamming against the wall and the gust of ice everywhere damn near made me drop Terry's prized bottle of spirits. I won't lie that I might have said a few words in the moment to shame the devil. I looked up with wide eyes in the direction of the door. I saw what had to be a tourist to our Atchafalaya backwater basin parts. It was a man dressed to the nines in a thin, business-type overcoat, like a lawyer or a pool hustler, or both in the same. There he stood covered in ice, shivering and white-faced. He was too far south, uptown New Orleans most likely, Old Metairie by my guessing, and too fancily dressed for my liking in an ice, rain, and lightning storm, I tell you. What in blazes could have made a man trek this far out in this bad weather? I resolved before I jetted out to the warmth of my bed to find out. Sugar Bear's bar was over 80 miles south of New Orleans. The bar was exactly 30 miles north of Grand Isle, what Louisiana calls a beach, but looks more like a marsh. It was the 20th of November, and the third icy front had passed for the year. This was the fourth ice storm, and it had been worse than any of the local Cajuns could have imagined. I'd come to Sugar Bear's to repent my sins to Terry, who was not an ordained minister, but a dealer in spirits and a patient ear. I was still reeling from all the sinning I did during the Halloween season. Witches can be such temptresses, I tell you, and coming to terms that I'd have to do a better job next year and not pick up strays or fleas. Maybe this northwest ice blizzard was my penance to keep on the narrow path and chaste. Well, at least disease-free for Christmas. A sheet of ice was sticking to the roads, sending a glare from the streetlights outside now. It'd be a slow crawl home to my camp around the corner. No way I'd chance a drive and slide out into the iced black waters of the Teche. If anything, I should have left 3 hours earlier when the first ice crashed on Sugar Bear's tin roof. But who knew the ice would keep coming in silver sheets this long? 3 times I watched my neighbor Billy LeComte grab his propane torch to heat the walkway around his camp while he went to check his fish traps. On the third pull of his hoop nets, Terry chanced to walk down to his wharf and ran him a Glenlivet, Scotch and a beer. His kindness and bravery in the frigid moment gave me hope for humanity. Lord knows more people needed to drink more booze, have a few more laughs, and not get so butthurt. Too many fragile snowflakes out there these days have ruined this world. Anyway, Billy told him the road crews were doing their best to salt the roads and turn people home due to all the ice. Louisiana drivers have a hard enough time driving on dry and rainy roads. Ice or snow made them lose their minds naturally. I heard Billy say as I stood out on Sugar Bear's balcony, "They are doing their best under the circumstances. Downtown by Teche's main road, by the shadows, it's salted pretty good. But the off-ramp from the interstate is another story. Hopefully, no fools try that in this storm." I heard Terry call back as he was squeaking and slipping back to his bar. "Too many fools in this state for that, Billy. There'll be some knucklehead that tries." Both men nodded in agreement, and then Terry continued his awkward climb back into his bar. I mentioned in the moment to Terry, "It's supposed to storm on through the night. WRNO just came over and advised 30-mile-an-hour winds with all the sleet and rain." Terry knocked ice off his black duster. He adjusted his brimmed leather hat, narrowed his chestnut eyes, and nodded toward me. "Another reason to close up early, Wyatt Lee." I winced in disappointment and waved my drink to him in agreement, sarcastically. So, before the stranger arrived, it had been me and Terry sitting in the bar, listening to the ting of the ice on the tin roof and the wind howling around the eaves as we continued on having a few drinks to warm the soul and listening to a lot more Stevie Ray while we reminisced on our youth. Terry would periodically check the hearth next to us. He'd toss another log on the black stone fireplace, and both of us would sit back in our favorite chairs to stay warm. The orange and red flames of the fire were the only light in the place besides the glowing jukebox. "All right, Wyatt. 1 Scotch, 1 bourbon, and then a bead of beer." Terry stood and stretched his back, then made his way to turn off the music, then glancing back, "The time has come to call it a day." To my utter surprise, he took down the top shelf Louis XIV stuff. That was a most righteous act that I'd never forget. At $200 a glass, and strictly for the high-dollar tourist, it was $300 a glass. He poured me 1 shot. Then before I could drink mine, he poured one himself and paused me for a toast. Shrugging, he went to the end of the bar to grab the keys. Terry turned back and caught me sneaking another swig. Wagging his calloused finger and shaking his head with a sly grin from the other end of the bar, he bellowed playfully, "Sneaky pirate, that's your last woman." We both laughed as he continued raising keys and his glass. "Anyway, to your health on this." That's when the door blasted open, bringing the curses and the sleet, and this stranger staggered in, shimmering like a meat popsicle with layers of ice on his shoulders and in his greased hair, I swear he looked like someone had dropped him in a vat of hard candy, and the wind had blown threads of the stuff all around him. Blasting ice winds sent us all to covering up and screaming obscenities. The wind gusted large grains of sleet and pools of iced rain and leaves in after him. In all hell's creation, man! Close the fucking door! I roared at the fool. The man looked as if he couldn't grasp what I was saying. Yeah, close a goddamn door. Terry bared his teeth and followed. Were you born on a bayou or something? Apologies, he whispered. Then I saw him swoon and fall to his knees, heaving. The stranger looked up with the wildest, bloodshot eyes I've ever seen on any man. Caged eyes, they were like a bobcat caught in a fishnet, complete with the cat-like moans and wails one would attribute to such a stir. He lowered his head and took in the deepest of breaths, then burst out like the howling November winds. Karen and my girls, he blabbered and pointed to the eastern swamp out past Avalon Island. I could hear the angst as he tried to make sense. My wife and my daughters are out there. The stranger, exhausted from those words, fell with a crashing thud face first to the floor. I looked at Terry in disbelief. Terry looked back at me and shrugged. Close the damn door, Wyatt, while I pull this fool inside and warm him up by the fire. Terry pointed to the door and proceeded to grab the passed out man's wrist and pull him by the roaring flames. I ran trying to avoid tripping over the passed out man. I grabbed the oaken door and pushed with a heave to close the door against the chilling winds. Pushing in the bolt to secure it, I made damn sure the ice storm wouldn't breach it and have us all in a frozen state. With the door secure, I turned around and headed back to Terry Terracina. He had lifted the man slightly and had him propped by the fire. The guy looked as gray as a corpse in the firelight, and I got kind of a macabre shiver seeing him in such a state. Terry had stood over the man and had slapped gently the man's blue cheeks to wake him. Then he proceeded patting his shoulders to get any sign of life. I got over to him and saw to my unease that his face held mottled gray blotches on his nose and across his cheeks. You didn't have to be a medical expert to realize this guy had been out in the ice storm for longer than he should have. I was born on these backwaters and knew how fast a wet man, a stranded soul, and an exposed fool could be killed in a winter storm. I'd had my fair shakes of close calls when my boat sunk in an iced-over marsh on a deer hunt. Our friend, in his present rigid discourse, had caught hypothermia out wherever he had hiked from, and even worse, he had a case of frostbite to his nose and ears. Damn, if this fool hasn't been out there at least 4 hours in the ice, rain, and cold, why? He's definitely got a spot or two on him that'll need tending. Terry took a deep sigh and then pointed to the bar fridge. I got Switzerland in the refrigerator, Wyatt. Go grab it, will you? I shook my head confused. What Huffing, he again pointed, and I made a dash to the fridge. We got no time to explain. It's in a brown mason jar. It's the electrolyte drink I give you the day after one of your benders. Especially when your hangovers are something fierce. Oh, that stuff. I see it. Then, as if Terry didn't already know, this stuff is like a miracle cure for hangovers, partner. I went with the jug in hand next to the stranger. I had bent down to sit the guy up. Terry moved to the bar window a moment to shake out a sudden cramp from all the bending and pulling of the frozen man. As he stood shaking his cramped leg, Terry grabbed the smelling salt from his first aid kit on a shelf by the bay window. We both winced as arcs of lightning flashed from the bluish-gray clouds outside. After a moment longer, Terry turned back and bent down to attend to the frozen stranger. He waved the salt across the man's warming nose. The man twisted his neck and practically contorted, struggling to get away from the ammonia vapors of the salts. He wrenched Terry's arm to pull the salt away. He threw a punch at me, fighting both of us, as he finally opened his confused eyes awake. I made ready to give the man the switchel, and Terry pulled open the fella's defrosted, wet coat. As the frozen man started to become more lucid, I watched as the stranger stared at both me and Terry with wild, panicked eyes. The salts had done the trick to wake him, all right. With his eyes darting to and from, about, the stranger half muttered and half screamed something guttural and inaudible to understand. Let her rip with the switchel. Get about a cup in him. That should liven him up. Terry grabbed the guy and ushered him to drink, and me to pour. Bringing the jug up, I paused. Are you sure he won't choke on the stuff? That molasses is harsh on a good day, Terry. You add in the apple cider vinegar and cayenne pepper, and it's damn right a flamethrower of disgusting. It'll get in his blood and kick things up like a firecracker for sure, Wyatt. Terry leaned the guy into the drink. The man twisted futilely in his arms. Go easy with the gunpowder juice. He'll be a bear to handle with just a cup. Terry pulled the skin of the man's lower chin and forced open his mouth. Shrugging and cocking my head, I lifted the mason jug and downed just over a cup into the man's gullet. Here's fire in your eye. Terry clamped the man's jaw shut to make sure he didn't spit out his fiery brand of switchel. I leaned back with the brown jug still in my hand. I looked on with my own wide eyes of bewilderment. Usually, I was the one getting the hangover remedy. To see this stuff kick in was beyond amazing. Terry had a surefire winner of a drink that he could easily sell as a home-brewed tonic. First thing I spied was the man's face of utter agony. After the guy had gulped it down, winced face and all, I heard the bone-shattering grind of his clenched jaw. In the same instance, I heard the man squeak out something from his backside. That might have been a ripped wet fart, whilst his body contorted as one big body cramp. Then shaken, practically seizing, the stranger started cracking his neck as he bellowed out visible steam from his mouth. I could empathize with the latter. I had spewed my own steam quite a few times after Terry had me drink the torrid battery acid tasting mash. Anyway, after bellowing his internal flame, his pale skin flushed to a rosy red. The man's eyes, that had been as clammed up as a cadaver, glittered and tittered open like bat wings. And then to Terry and my surprise, there was another pleading, guttural scream from the sad sack that sent shivers down my spine.